Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show that's engineered to just cut through all the noise. We take these dense stacks of sources, articles, legal docs, you name it, and we give you the essential, distilled truth fast.
And today we are really diving deep into a figure whose entire life it's fundamentally reshaped how the world communicates. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg.
That's right. When you actually look at the full body of source material on him, you're not just looking at a successful American businessman or a programmer.
No, not at all. You're basically tracing the entire history of modern social media itself. He's the co-founder, the chairman, CEO, and crucially, the controlling shareholder of Meta Platforms.
Which everyone, of course, remembers as Facebook.
Right.
And our mission today is, well, it's ambitious. We want to synthesize his entire multifaceted career, from this coding prodigy to a global policy figure, a billionaire philanthropist, and I think it's fair to say an increasingly controversial public personality.
And deliver the key insights you need to really understand his influence, because it is enduring. It's about getting a handle on the legal challenges, the political maneuvering, the massive philanthropic work, and more recently, this really dramatic shift in his personal image.
The scale of his rise is really the starting point for all of it, isn't it? The reason for all the scrutiny.
Absolutely. He was born on May 14th, 1984, and he hits this landmark that most people can't even fathom. In 2008, he becomes the world's youngest self-made billionaire. He was just 23 years old.
23. That's an astonishing data point.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets even more staggering when you look at where he is now. According to Forbes estimates, as of December 2025, his net worth is around $220 billion.
And just a few months before that, in October 2025, that estimate was momentarily even higher. It was at $251 billion. That briefly made him the third richest person on the entire planet. Yeah. That kind of exponential wealth and all the power that comes with it, it just naturally draws immediate and an intense legal, ethical, and political scrutiny.
And that scrutiny, it really began almost the second the Facebook launched, and it has just gotten more intense every year since.
And that's the thread we're going to trace today, this constant meeting of innovation and, well, inevitable friction.
Okay, so let's unpack that initial narrative, the Genesis story.
Mm-hmm.
We have to start in White Plains, New York, where he wasn't just some kid who was casually interested in computers. He was, by all accounts, a serious programming prodigy almost from the jump.
Absolutely. The sources are clear on this. He learned to program in his childhood. The famous origin story that gets cited all the time is ZuckNet, a program he created when he was around 11 years old.
11. And what was it exactly?
It was an inter-office messaging system. It allowed the computers in his home and the computers in his father's dental office to communicate with each other.
So this wasn't just building a simple website or something.
No. This was understanding complex networking, localized communication protocols before he was even a teenager. It's a whole different level.
And he didn't slow down. In high school, he built something way more sophisticated, the Synapse Media Player.
Right, and the really compelling part about Synapse is that it wasn't just some generic audio player. It used machine learning to analyze and actually predict a user's listening habits.
Which is, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Because that directly foreshadows the core business model of Facebook years and years later.
Exactly. Using data, in this case it's just music preference, to predict user behavior and then personalize the experience for them. Synapse was so impressive that it got posted to Slashdot, which was a really influential tech site, and it even got a pretty respectable 3 out of 5 rating from PC Magazine.
There's that quote from the New Yorker that I think sums it up perfectly. They said, "Some kids played computer games, Mark created them."
And that really points to a profound difference in both skill and, I think, ambition.
That ambition showed up in his education, too. There's this one detail that illustrates his drives. While he was still in high school, he was taking graduate-level computer courses at Mercy College.
Every Thursday evening, he was operating at a postgraduate level before he even got his college acceptance letter.
Which brings us to Harvard. From 2002 to 2004, he arrives on campus with this established reputation as a programming prodigy.
Right, and he's studying psychology and computer science. He lived in Kirkland House, was part of the Alpha Epsilon Pi fraternity. All pretty standard stuff on the surface.
But then he starts applying that talent to actual social engineering problems. First, we see something called course match.
And this was constructive, it was genuinely useful. It was a program to help students pick their classes based on what their peers were choosing, and it helped them organize study groups.
So it's already leveraging social data, who your friends are, what classes they're in, to deliver some kind of utility.
Yes, but then came the moment that really set the stage for everything that followed. Face Mash.
The infamous predecessor to Facebook. This was the program where he scraped photos from the online Facebooks of the various dorms and just asked users to rank who was hotter.
It was hugely popular and very short-lived.
Because Face Mash wasn't just a controversial idea, it actually caused real infrastructural damage, right?
It did. The sources say its popularity just overwhelmed a Harvard network switch, and it completely cut off internet access for a whole section of the university.
And crucially, the site sparked this immediate, intense backlash because the photos of the students were used without any permission at all.
He had to apologize, and the college administration shut the site down very, very quickly. But the pattern started right there, in that dorm room.
What pattern is that?
Rapid development leading to unexpected viral success, which then leads to technical chaos, and finally, immediate ethical blowback about privacy and data usage. That is the essential cycle of the platform he later created. It all began with Face Mash.
So he moves really quickly from that failed experiment to this successful launch. He starts writing the code for the Facebook in January of 2004, and then on February 4th, 2004, it goes live.
And he launches it with his roommates, Eduardo Saverin, Andrew McCollum, Dustin Moskovitz, and Chris Hughes.
It's interesting to think about where the idea actually came from. Some sources suggest it was inspired by his prep school, Phillips Exeter Academy.
Right, they published a physical directory called the Photo Address Book, and the students just called it the Facebook.
So he basically digitized this exclusive directory-based social tool. He took away the friction of the physical book and made it instantly interconnected.
And it was never just contained to Harvard. It started as a Harvard thing, sure, but the expansion was aggressive. Almost immediately, Dustin Moskovitz started helping him spread it to other Ivy League schools and major universities.
Columbia, NYU, Stanford, Dartmouth, Cornell.
UPenn, Brown, Yale. The demand for this kind of exclusive, gated online community was just enormous.
And that rapid expansion is what drove the ultimate career decision.
It did. Zuckerberg drops out of Harvard in his second year to focus entirely on the project, and his co-founders come with him. They all relocate to Palo Alto, California.
And they lease this small, simple house that was both their office and where they lived. That summer, the summer of 2004, was pivotal.
Absolutely pivotal. That's when they meet and secure that crucial early investment from Peter Thiel. And that single meeting really solidifies the company's trajectory, taking it out of the academic world and putting it right into the heart of Silicon Valley's highly capitalized ecosystem.
That move to Palo Alto, it was more than just a change of address, wasn't it? It really cemented the company's core operating philosophy, which quickly became known as this aggressive hacker ethos.
It was definitely unconventional, almost anti-corporate, especially for a company that was dealing with so much sensitive personal data from the very beginning.
But even by 2009, he was taking professional advice, right? He was talking to people like the former Netscape CFO Peter Curry about financing strategies.
Oh, for sure. They was getting sophisticated on the business end, but internally, the spirit remained rebellious. And that spirit, that aggression, it paid off immensely. By July of 2010, Facebook hit 500 million users.
And that ethos was perfectly captured by the tech journalist Stephen Levy, who wrote that Zuckerberg clearly thinks of himself as a hacker.
And the defining quote for that whole era was Zuckerberg's own motto: "It's okay to break things, to make them better."
That mantra just celebrated disruption and speed over everything else. Caution, polish, thinking things through.
And they didn't just preach it, they institutionalized it with hackathons. They held them every 6 to 8 weeks.
Right, where the staff would just stay up all night, conceive of a project, and have to complete it within this really tight window.
It was high-pressure, rapid-fire creativity, all designed to keep the company feeling dynamic and, frankly, a little chaotic. Zuckerberg himself was always there, reinforcing the idea that this wasn't just some optional event. This was the core personality of the company.
But I have to ask, didn't that move fast and break things ethos also provide the perfect corporate cover for questionable ethics? Or, at the very least, a real lack of careful consideration for the societal impact of what they were building?
That is the ultimate tension, and you can see it all through the source material. The goal was velocity. If a decision involved some ethical ambiguity, but it accelerated growth or innovation, the bias was heavily toward execution.
And this early philosophy led to some pretty controversial public statements. Like at Stanford Startup School, he said that Young people are just smarter, and entrepreneurs should be biased toward hiring them.
Right. That kind of exclusionary, ageist rhetoric was polarizing, but it really spoke to the immense confidence they all had, which came from that rapid success led by a very, very young team.
So as the company matured, the structure got more complex, even if the philosophy didn't really change. He takes a symbolic $1 salary as CEO.
Which is a common move for founders whose wealth comes from their stock.
But that $1 figure, it really masks the absolute power he holds as the controlling shareholder. He effectively has veto power over any strategic decision.
And that controlling shareholder status was absolutely key to the company's massive integration plans that he laid out in 2019. Zuckerberg initiated this plan to weave an end-to-end encrypted system across their three main platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.
And by August 2020, they had already integrated the chat systems for Instagram and Messenger, allowing for that seamless cross-communication.
Yep.
But this wasn't just about user convenience, was it? This was about creating a massive, interconnected, defensive moat around the company.
That's exactly it. If regulators ever wanted to try and break up the company, integrating the core infrastructure this deeply would make that process geometrically more difficult. It was a move to preserve the integrity of the Meta empire.
It was a strategic consolidation of market power. He recognized the threat of antitrust scrutiny years before it became the central policy challenge it is today.
Right. And meanwhile, his personal recognition just exploded alongside the company's size. In 2007, he's on the MIT Technology Review's TR35 list for innovators under 35. By 2010, Vanity Fair ranks him #1 on its top 100 influential people list.
Which was a huge climb from number 23 just the year before.
A massive climb. And the culmination of all that early recognition came in 2010, the same year they hit 500 million users, when he was named Time Person of the Year.
It really signaled his transformation from a Harvard prodigy to a global figure whose decisions were impacting populations larger than most countries.
But that rapid success and that break things attitude, they led directly into a series of massive, expensive, and very public legal battles.
And this is where the complexity really starts, because the entire story of Zuckerberg's rise is just inseparable from the legal labyrinth he had to navigate, starting with the very ownership of the idea itself.
The first and certainly the most famous conflict was the Connect You lawsuit. It was launched by the Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra.
And their central accusation, which they filed back in 2004, was that Zuckerberg had intentionally misled them. They claimed he was supposed to be helping them build their site, harvardconnection.com-, which later became Connect You, but was actually stealing their idea for the Facebook the whole time.
This lawsuit just dragged on for years. It was filed, it was dismissed, it was refiled, Facebook countersued. It was messy.
And the resolution, which became famous thanks to pop culture, finally came in 2008.
A settlement. $20 million in cash and 1.2 million Facebook shares. And that share portion alone, if you adjust for inflation, was worth about $29.3 million in 2024 terms.
So it was a very expensive way to legitimize the company's founding story.
Extremely expensive. And that lawsuit was highly dramatic, and not just because of the settlement. In November 2007, during the proceedings, court documents were somehow posted online by a magazine called 02138.
And these documents revealed incredibly sensitive personal details, right? Like his social security number and private addresses.
All of it. Facebook tried to have the documents taken down, but the court denied their request, which just highlights how quickly his private life became public domain because of these ownership battles.
That's a fascinating detail, but I think the related story about the Harvard Crimson editors is far more telling about his early operating mindset.
Oh, absolutely. 6 days after the Facebook launched, while he was already facing this complaint from the Winklevosses, Zuckerberg used private login data from his own platform to break into the email accounts of 2 Harvard Crimson editors.
Who were investigating the Connect You complaint against him.
Exactly. It was a clear, unambiguous violation of privacy and trust, an action taken right at the platform's infancy that immediately established a pattern of leveraging access for personal advantage.
It really underscored the lack of guardrails that was just inherent in that hacker mindset.
It did. And then you move to the internal friction with co-founder Eduardo Saverin. Saverin sued Zuckerberg and Facebook in 2005.
His allegation was that they were illegally spending his money on personal expenses, and he wanted clarity on his stake in the company.
And the result, again, was a settlement out of court. The terms were sealed, but the key takeaways were that Saverin's title as co-founder was affirmed, a really important historical acknowledgement. And critically, he agreed to stop talking to the press about the dispute.
A classic Silicon Valley cleanup job.
A textbook case. But perhaps the most bizarre legal challenge of all was the Paul Seglia claim.
Right. This was the guy who owned a wood pellet fuel company.
That's the one. He filed a lawsuit in 2010 claiming that a contract he had with Zuckerberg from 2003 entitled him to 50% of the revenue plus 1% interest per day. He was claiming he owned 84% of Facebook.
Facebook immediately dismissed the suit as completely frivolous, and the timeline itself was just highly suspicious.
It was. Zuckerberg was working on FaceMesh in 2003, sure, but the actual domain name, thefacebook.com, wasn't even registered until January 2004. So how could a contract predate the product itself?
And the outcome here really provides the clarity.
It does. Seglia was eventually arrested in October 2012 by federal authorities. He was charged with mail and wire fraud and fabricating evidence. Investigators found no mention of Facebook at all in the original emails he'd submitted as proof.
So the whole thing was baseless. It just speaks to the extreme lengths people would go to try and claim a piece of that Facebook fortune.
Absolutely. And beyond just ownership disputes, the platform's global reach quickly landed Zuckerberg in international legal and cultural hot water, notably in Pakistan in 2010.
What happened there?
So Pakistan launched a criminal investigation against Zuckerberg and the other co-founders because of a Draw Muhammad contest that appeared on the platform.
Wow.
Yeah, the local authorities actually asked Interpol to assist in their arrest on blasphemy charges. The platform was blocked in Pakistan for a time until the controversial material was finally taken down.
That must have been an early and very stark realization of how quickly a global communications platform could just collide with deeply held cultural and religious norms that are protected by national law.
A huge wake-up call. And domestically, one of his most public battles involved real estate, of all things, in Hawaii between 2014 and 2017.
This is when he purchased that massive 700 acres on the island of Kauai, right, to create a private estate.
Exactly. But the history of land ownership in Hawaii is incredibly unique and complex. He filed 8 quiet title and partition lawsuits against hundreds of native Hawaiians who owned these small inherited tracts of land, often called kuleana lands, that were located within his much larger property.
And the intent of these lawsuits was basically to force them to sell their partial ownership to clean up the title for him.
Correct. And that generated immediate and furious public criticism. The sources described the outrage. People were calling it an act of neocolonialism.
And while he initially defended it, saying he wanted to pay the owners their fair share, the reality of Hawaiian land ownership law, which is so different from the other 49 states, just made the whole legal maneuver seem highly inappropriate.
He did eventually drop the lawsuits. He stated that he regretted his lack of understanding of the local laws and customs.
But the story didn't end there.
No, it didn't. He later purchased additional surrounding land, bringing his total estate on Kauai to 1,500 acres. And a lot of it is now gated off, cementing his position as one of the largest private landowners on the island, despite the public relations disaster those initial lawsuits created.
These constant legal battles and just the sheer global scale of Meta, it all led directly to his intense and, let's be honest, often awkward entanglement with policy and politics, which of course culminated in those high-stakes congressional testimonies we've all seen.
Oh, the scrutiny has been relentless since 2018. It started in a big way with the fallout from the Cambridge Analytica data scandal. Zuckerberg testified before the U.S. Senate. He acknowledged the data misuse. He called it a breach of trust.
But it's worth noting the selective cooperation there. He consistently refused requests to appear before a UK parliamentary committee about the exact same scandal.
A very important point. Then, in 2020, the focus shifts from data misuse to regulatory immunity, specifically Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
That's the law that gives platforms legal immunity for content posted by third parties.
Exactly. And the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee voted unanimously to subpoena Zuckerberg, along with the CEOs of Google and Twitter, to testify about it.
This was a critical challenge, especially from Republicans, who were arguing that the immunity from Section 230 was protecting social media companies from allegations of anti-conservative bias in their moderation.
Right. The law was originally meant to foster free speech online, but by 2020 it had become the central battleground for content moderation policy.
And the issues only got more intense around political violence. In 2021, after January 6th, Zuckerberg had to testify again, this time before the House Energy and Commerce Committee.
And that was about Facebook's specific role in the spread of hate speech and misinformation leading up to the attack on the U.S. Capitol. He acknowledged the company's responsibility and, outlined plans for improvement.
And most recently, in January of 2024, the focus shifted to the most sensitive demographic of all, children.
Yes, at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on online abuse and child safety, he delivered this highly emotional and very publicized apology. He actually stood up, turned toward the families of victims who were in the room, and apologized for the harm his platform had caused.
That scene was visceral. It was broadcast globally, and it really just illustrated the massive pressure he's constantly under. Now, if we look at his personal political engagement, it seems highly strategic.
Very. He's never publicly revealed his voting history or any party affiliation. He's just listed as no preference on voter rolls. Yet he actively steers political advocacy through his 501c lobbying group, FWD.US, which he launched in 2013.
And FWD.US was founded with what seemed like progressive goals: immigration reform, improving education, technological breakthroughs.
But the group immediately drew intense controversy because they were also funding lobbying and ads that supported fossil fuel development, specifically the Keystone XL pipeline and drilling in the Arctic.
I mean, that is a staggering contradiction. How do you square supporting education reform with funding groups that are explicitly pushing for environmentally damaging projects?
The explanation, at least as it's presented in the sources, is that FWD.US was operating transactionally. They argued that supporting these economically powerful interests helped them build a bipartisan coalition that was necessary to achieve their main goal, which was immigration reform.
But liberal and progressive groups, like the Sierra Club and MoveOn.org, they didn't buy that explanation at all. They boycotted Facebook ads in protest.
Right. And Zuckerberg personally defended the group, trying to steer the conversation back to the fair treatment of undocumented immigrants. But it really reveals the uncomfortable transactional nature of high-level DC lobbying.
Historically, though, he had been willing to take clear stances on certain social issues. In 2013, he actively supported SF-LGBT Pride, marching with hundreds of Facebook employees.
And in 2015, after the attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, he invoked his own Jewish heritage to offer vocal support for Muslims, saying they were always welcome on Facebook.
He also showed zero tolerance for racism inside the company. In 2016, he publicly and formally rebuked employees who had crossed out Black Lives Matter on company walls and replaced it with All Lives Matter.
He called that action malicious and a form of silencing speech. It was a very clear, forceful stance on social justice within the company walls.
So you see this clear historical tilt towards progressive or at least socially liberal causes in his early career. But the sources indicate a recent and profound political shift, especially by 2024.
A definite shift. He began actively discouraging employee activism and, according to private accounts in the press, started describing his own politics as leaning more towards libertarianism or classical liberalism.
And that shift came into really stark public relief in August of 2024. He stated publicly that he regretted not doing more to resist pressure from the Biden administration to censor COVID-19 related content.
And that regret, it signals a notable pivot away from compliance with the previous Democratic administration and a much greater emphasis on free speech fundamentalism, or at least an anti-censorship stance.
Which leads directly to him strategically mending his relationship with the political right. After Donald Trump won the election, Zuckerberg went and dined with him at Mar-a-Lago in November 2024.
Reportedly, the goal was to repair their historically strained relationship. And around that same time, Meta reportedly donated a substantial sum of $1 million to a Trump-related fund.
So this seems less like a change in personal philosophy and more like a tactical business adjustment aimed squarely at regulatory relief.
That's how it's framed. This strategic maneuvering all culminated in March of 2025 when he publicly referenced his relationship with the Trump administration while he was arguing for a favorable settlement in that ongoing FTC antitrust case.
The one with the massive $30 billion price tag.
Exactly. So the political shift appears to be inextricably linked to Meta's desperate need to secure a friendly regulatory environment for its future.
So if politics is about influence, then philanthropy for Zuckerberg is about the highly structured deployment of that influence and his wealth on a scale that, very few people on Earth can manage. And it's done primarily through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, or CZI.
He started off pretty traditionally. He signed the Giving Pledge early on, committing to donate at least half of his wealth, alongside people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett.
And his first major public donation was $100 million to the Newark Public Schools in September of 2010.
And that donation was instantly criticized for its timing. It came right as the highly critical movie The Social Network was being released.
Right. Zuckerberg pushed back on that, though. He said he had considered making the donation anonymously to avoid that connection, but that Newark's Mayor Cory Booker and Governor Chris Christie convinced him that the public visibility would actually help the cause.
Unfortunately, despite the good intentions and the huge scale of the gift, the journalist Dale Russakoff later wrote that the $100 million was largely wasted.
Which really just highlights that common challenge of applying massive private wealth to complex public sector problems without having the necessary groundwork and local integration in place first.
Exactly. But despite that setback, his giving just escalated significantly. In 2013, he made what was recognized as the largest charitable gift on public record that year.
18 million Facebook shares, valued at $990 million at the time, which is about $1.3 billion in 2024 dollars.
An incredible sum. And he gave it to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. He followed that up in 2014 with a $25 million donation to combat the Ebola virus epidemic in West Africa.
And then came the formation of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, CZI, with his wife, Priscilla Chan, who's a doctor.
And the commitment here was absolutely staggering. They pledged to transfer 99% of their Facebook shares over the course of their lives. At the time, that was valued at $45 billion.
Which is nearly $60 billion in today's terms.
Almost unbelievable.
But what's truly unique here, and where the analysis really needs to focus, is the structure of CZI. Unlike almost all other massive foundations, which are 501c tax-exempt charities like the Gates Foundation CZI, is an LLC. It's a limited liability company.
And that distinction is so important.
Why is it?
The LLC structure gives them immense control and flexibility. It's why some journalists have called their approach philanthrocapitalism. A standard foundation has to dedicate its funds to charitable grants, it can't invest in for-profit companies, and it has to follow strict IRS rules.
But an LLC.
An LLC can lobby politically, it can invest directly in for-profit companies, and it gives Zuckerberg and Chan way more control over the direction and the speed of their investments, all without the same level of public disclosure that the IRS requires of a traditional foundation. It's structured for both power and purpose.
And we saw that power applied immediately. In 2015, they gave $75 million to the San Francisco General Hospital.
It was the largest individual donation ever made to a public hospital in the U.S., and as a result, the facility was renamed the Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and Trauma Center.
But again, even this noble act quickly collided with public scrutiny over the source of the wealth.
It did. In 2020, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a non-binding resolution that condemned the renaming.
And their reasoning was explicit. They said a public hospital should not be named after an individual whose platform was accused of endangering public health, spreading misinformation, and violating privacy.
It's just a clear sign of the deep public distrust that follows Meta's actions, no matter what good CZI tries to do.
So in terms of scientific impact, CZI created the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub in 2016. They dedicated $600 million to this tax-exempt charity located near UCSF, Berkeley, and Stanford.
And the goal there is to foster collaboration on major scientific breakthroughs, particularly in curing and preventing diseases. The BioHub tries to maintain an open-source spirit, requiring investigators to publish their manuscripts on preprint servers like Xerox very quickly.
But the structure, again, dictates control.
Always. The BioHub retains the right to commercialize any research it funds. The inventors can choose open-source licensing, but they have to get permission from the BioHub first. So while the intent is collaboration, the ultimate business right to the intellectual property stays with the organization that they control.
This is the ultimate tension, isn't it? CZI is trying to cure disease, but Meta, the source of all the wealth, is being accused of causing societal harm. How can those two corporate personalities coexist under one controlling shareholder?
That tension is painfully evident in the final point on this. There are internal communications that were disclosed in an ongoing lawsuit about Meta's impact on youth. And the documents allege that Zuckerberg personally rejected multiple proposals from his own senior executives.
People like Instagram head Adam Mosseri and the president of Global Affairs, Nick Clegg.
Exactly. And their proposals were aimed at improving teenagers' mental health on the platforms.
That's a critical revelation. He personally overruled leaders inside his own company who wanted to implement more user protections. It suggests a strong priority on maximizing growth and engagement, even at the expense of user well-being.
specifically targeting the more than 30 million teenagers who use Instagram in the United States. It just highlights the absolute top-down control that Zuckerberg maintains, where the ultimate financial and growth imperatives of Meta seem to consistently override internal ethical and user safety recommendations.
Which stands in just jarring contrast to the immense public good he's trying to achieve through CZI.
A complete contrast.
Okay, moving to the present day, we really need to analyze this transformation. The wealth, the wellness, and the dramatic, highly visible rebranding efforts that have completely changed his public image over the last couple of years.
First, just a quick grounding in his personal life. He met Priscilla Chan at a Harvard frat party in 2003. They got married in 2012, celebrating on the very same day she graduated from medical school.
And they have 3 daughters. Max, born in 2015, who has a Chinese name, Chen Mingyu, a second daughter in 2017, and Aurelia, born in 2023.
And they also famously own a poodle dog named Beast, who, in a sign of the times, had over 2 million followers on Facebook as of 2019.
They live on this large, high-security compound in Palo Alto, but even their private family life generates friction. In late 2025, Wired reported on significant neighbor complaints that an illegal school was operating on the Zuckerberg property without the necessary permits.
It just confirms that his level of wealth deployment often creates logistical headaches for the communities around him.
The resources they command are just staggering. Forbes ranked him the 8th wealthiest American in 2023 at $106 billion, but his real estate portfolio alone is valued at $320 million.
And that includes 10 homes across high-value areas like Palo Alto, San Francisco, and Lake Tahoe, totaling over 1,400 acres. This is less about finding a place to live and more about strategic land banking and, just securing total privacy.
But the shift in his personal visual identity has been the most striking recent change. For years, he was known for his uniform. The iconic gray T-shirt and simple jeans. It signaled this focused, almost ascetic tech CEO who was completely uninterested in fashion.
And by 2024, that look was completely gone.
Completely. He shifted dramatically to include gold chains, trendier streetwear, and just a generally more polished, masculine aesthetic.
And Vanity Fair described this new look explicitly as a mag-gris rebrand. They argued it visually paralleled Meta's efforts to appease and align with the newly elected Trump administration.
And while Zuckerberg denied hiring a stylist, the visual change was undeniable, and it was perfectly timed with his political pivot.
And concurrent with that fashion shift was his development of these intense physical pursuits. In 2022, he took up training in mixed martial arts, MMA, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, BJJ.
And this wasn't a casual hobby. This was a complete and total dedication to combat sports.
That dedication quickly translated to competition. He competed in a BJJ tournament in May 2023, and he did really well, winning silver and gold medals at the white belt level.
His progression was fast. He was promoted to blue belt just 2 months later.
Very fast. He announced ambitious plans for an MMA debut, but that was unfortunately delayed due to a pretty significant ACL injury he suffered in training in November 2023. This whole focus on physical prowess has become a new cornerstone of his modern image, the entrepreneur as the disciplined warrior.
Okay, let's turn to what is perhaps the most glaring contradiction in his modern life: the massive yacht fleet, especially when you contrast it with his earlier public advocacy. In 2017, he gave a commencement speech at Harvard calling for action to stop global warming.
And yet, 7 years later, in 2024, he takes delivery of the mega-yacht launch pad. This vessel is enormous, between 118 and 119 meters long. It was purchased for approximately $300 million.
To put that size in perspective, it's significantly longer than a football field.
It's huge. And it's not just one boat. This luxury vessel requires a smaller, dedicated support or shadow yacht named Wingman.
And that vessel, at about 67 meters, is valued around $30 million, and it just functions as the mobile logistical platform. It carries supplies, specialized equipment, acts as the tender for the bigger yacht.
It's a two-vessel operation that signifies a level of wealth deployment that is it's hard to comprehend.
And the fleet has already generated international controversy over its environmental optics.
Yes, in early 2025, the two vessels were tracked operating in the sensitive Arctic environment, including at Longyearbyen in Svalbard, where local environmental activists staged protests specifically targeting the massive carbon emissions generated by luxury mega-yachts like his.
And the way they use the fleet also highlights an extreme dedication to facilitating luxury. Sustainability Times detailed a 5,280-mile voyage they took to Norway's fjords for a heli-skiing trip.
And here's where the logistics get really precise. They reportedly used Wingman's dedicated helipad while it was offshore. This allowed the Zuckerberg party to avoid Norwegian restrictions that prohibit tourist helicopters from landing on Norwegian soil.
So it's a perfect example of using staggering wealth to achieve a unique, highly personal luxury experience while simultaneously sidestepping local environmental regulations that are meant to protect fragile ecosystems.
A perfect example. And for a final anecdote of this extreme wealth deployment, in late 2024, early 2025, his main yacht, Launchpad, sailed 4,800 miles across oceans to French Polynesia and just waited in Tahiti for weeks.
Without him ever boarding it.
Without him ever boarding. The vessel was moved immense distances at great environmental and financial cost, purely as a contingent asset, just in case he wanted to use it.
These actions just stand in such stark contrast to his earlier public image as this simple, focused, environmentally aware leader.
It's a complete 180. And finally, one last point on his personal philosophy. He was raised Reform Jewish, but later identified as an atheist. However, in 2016, he publicly stated he went through a period of questioning things, but now believes that religion is very important.
And that shift kind of aligned with his 2017 Great American Road Trip, where he visited every state, met with diverse communities, and notably spoke at the Mother Emanuel AME Church.
A lot of shifts in a short period of time.
So what does this all mean? We've traced Mark Zuckerberg from this precocious programmer of Zucknet through this complex web of legal settlements, the Winklevoss shares, the sealed Saverin agreement, the bizarre Seglia fabrication, and that sensitive Hawaiian land battle, all of which established a pattern of using aggressive means to secure total control.
And we've seen that power evolve into massive political influence, which necessitated all those congressional appearances on issues from data privacy to child safety. And it ran alongside a strategic shift toward libertarianism and alignment with the Trump administration, all seemingly aimed at securing regulatory relief for Meta.
And then juxtaposed against that hyper-controlled corporate existence is the massive deployment of his wealth through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, that non-traditional LLC structure allowing for maximum control and political leverage over his philanthropy.
All balanced against the alarming evidence that he personally vetoed proposals to improve teenagers' mental health on his own platforms.
And then tying it all together is his modern public image. The shift from the gray hoodie to gold chains, the intense physical discipline of MMA, and the conspicuously consumptive operation of that massive two-vessel globe-trotting yacht fleet.
Which often operates in environmentally sensitive areas, underscoring a transformation from, the ascetic founder to something more like a supreme sovereign.
Before we close, we have to touch on the cultural lens that really shaped public perception of him for years. The 2010 film, The Social Network.
Right. The film, which was based on the book The Accidental Billionaires, famously prioritized storytelling over strict factual truth. The screenwriter, Aaron Sorkin, was very direct about this. He said his fidelity was to the narrative arc, not the historical record.
And Zuckerberg was publicly critical of it. He said he wished he hadn't been the subject of a movie while he was still establishing his career and trying to reinforce his image as a good guy.
And while the film was a huge critical success, David Kirkpatrick, who wrote The Facebook Effect, claimed the movie was only 40% true.
So he acknowledged that the factual incidents, like the face mask controversy, were accurate. But the overall impression that Zuckerberg was this socially inept nerd who betrayed his friends just to get into elite Harvard social clubs was fundamentally false.
Right. Zuckerberg repeatedly denied that joining those clubs was his motivation. And interestingly, Sorkin himself later retracted some of those harsher impressions. When he was accepting the Golden Globes, he publicly addressed Zuckerberg and acknowledged him as a great entrepreneur, a visionary, and an incredible altruist.
He kind of walked back some of the negative characterizations that were embedded in his own script.
He did.
So the ultimate synthesis here is just this dizzying display of contradictions inherent in controlling such a globally influential platform.
Yeah.
I mean, consider the fact that Zuckerberg, the controlling shareholder who can internally reject proposals to improve teen mental health, a decision that maximizes user time and therefore profit, is simultaneously undertaking this structured, multi-billion-dollar philanthropic work to cure diseases via the CZI BioHub.
It is a staggering disconnect between business velocity and societal responsibility. So the question for you, the listener, is this. What does the synthesis of these opposing actions, the aggressive maximization of growth and the increasingly high-profile, conspicuous consumption lifestyle, evidenced by the multi-vessel yacht fleet, What does that tell us about the future priorities of Meta and its single most powerful shareholder?
Is this complex individual just focused on achieving his desired end goals, regardless of the aggressive or often contradictory memes he employs in his business, his philanthropy, and his personal life?
That's a profound concern about the future of corporate responsibility and personal power.
Something for you to mull on until our next deep dive. Thank you for joining us.